Kia ora and welcome to this really short video on how we can work out what is living or not. So deduce just means working out whether or not something is alive or is non-living. So before we start that, there are two really important things that we need to talk about, and those are two types of factors that affect our ecosystems in biology. Those are abiotic factors and biotic factors. Now, you might have heard parts of these words before. Bio, obviously, we've heard from biology, the study of living things. So biotic means living factors, or factors that are considered alive. And we're going to work out what that is today. Secondly are abiotic factors. So anything else in our ecosystem that can be affected that is not living. So a really good example of these is things like the weather or temperature, the amount of water available. So it's usually to do with compounds or chemicals and things like that are really important to an ecosystem but are not considered alive. And they're not considered alive because of some very important factors. So you may have heard of Mrs. C GREN. Mrs. C GREN is not a person, although she might be somewhere in the world, but it is a way to remember things. Okay, so MRS GREN, Mrs. C GREN. Now, sometimes you'll, when you look this up online, you will only see Mrs. GREN. We in our curriculum will look at C as being cells. And I'll talk about those a bit later. If you've already done the cells video, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So, this is the most important part of this video. If you're alive, you must do all the processes that each of these letters stands for. Okay, I'll say that again. If you're alive, you must do all of the processes that these letters stand for. So we're going to quickly go through those today. So M is movement, R is respiration, S is sensitivity, G is growth, and we've already covered C as cells, R is reproduction, E is excretion, and N is nutrition. Okay, I'm going to give you some examples of each of these processes so you can understand them and even give me some examples from real world creatures and things that are alive. So the M is movement. So anything that allows an object, a thing to move. So here you can see me when I was at school tackling in a rugby game. So I'm moving. Okay. I'm using cylons. Part of our course this year looks at robots, so cylons also move, but are they alive? And that's what we'll try and work out today. So movement, the ability to move. Now, you might say, oh, a plant doesn't get up and move. Okay, no, but it can move towards the sun. It has a lot of tropisms that allow it to manipulate its leaf direction and things like that, so they can move. Things like brambles can go a long distance by travelling and growing in certain directions. So plants can move, and another good example of this is their seeds, but we'll get to that soon. Respiration. This is one that is often confusing, particularly at your first years in college, but it's the ability to produce energy, okay? And you must produce energy from two things. In living organisms, it's usually oxygen and food, glucose, sugar. Okay, in the process called respiration. Now, breathing is a part of that, but a lot of people get confused that respiration is just breathing. Okay, it's not quite right. That's only the first half, to get the oxygen in and the carbon dioxide out. Okay, the other part is involving your digestive system to get your glucose in. But respiration is to make energy. That's what that word means. Now, we do that with food. Mechanical organisms, if we're trying to work out if the cylons are alive, could be doing that with their batteries. Who knows? So we'll keep going to see if they tick any of the other boxes. Next, this is just a reminder that it is not breathing. Breathing is just part of that process. So jump the gun a little bit there. All right. So S is for sensitivity. Now, you close your eyes when the sun is shining brightly. Okay, you get hot and you sweat as a response to heat. We can sense a lot going around us. You've got your multiple senses. We can touch things, taste, hear, see, okay, we can smell. All of our senses allow us to interact with the world around us. We can also put sensors into robots and into contraptions. So technically they can sense different things as well. So do we just sense things? Not necessarily, but it is one of the things you must tick if you're alive. So that's responding to stimulus from our environment, and it's often responding to abiotic stimulus. So that word from before. Things like light, things like heat are abiotic factors, and we respond to those because we have senses. All right, now cells. These are the tiny building blocks of life. All living organisms have them, and they are microscopic, very, very small, and there's a reason for that, and you'll cover that when you look at cells in a specific video. But we are made up of them, right down to a single-celled organism like bacteria has a cell. If you have cells, you are considered living. Okay? Now, if we were to put a Cylon's skin under the microscope or its processing chip, we wouldn't see cells, but we would see tiny microprocessing chips that do very much a similar function. So, again, you could make the argument that a Cylon robot Centurion is alive because they have these tiny microscopic parts that do very much the same thing as cells. So far we've ticked all of the boxes for both examples, humans and Cylons. Let's keep going. G, growth. So living things can grow and increase in size and complexity. Obviously, you were not always as big as you are. When you were born, you were a tiny little baby, and now you are on your way to being a fully grown adult, like myself. However, if we look at our robots, they are built. They do not grow. They might be able to add on things to themselves, but in terms of them growing, it's a bit of a stretch to compare a robot to us in the terms of how we grow in complexity and things like our brain development and things like that. Whereas a Cylon, you'd have to upgrade and put new parts in and things like that. We don't put a new brain into our bodies every couple of years to upgrade. Our brain does it naturally. It grows, it develops by itself. So, growth. This is the first one the Cylons don't tick. So, but we do. So we are still on the path to being alive. All right, reproduction. Living things produce offspring. Okay, reproduction continues the survival of each species. This is the meaning of life for many species on this planet, if not all species, to pass on their genetic information to the next generation. Now, most organisms do this by using their DNA. If you're sexually reproducing, you need a partner, and you half your DNA with your partner, and you combine it to make a new, unique organism that has similar traits to both parents. Some organisms clone themselves through asexual reproduction in much a very similar way by using their genetic code, but they don't need to have a partner to contribute half. Robots, on the other hand, yes, we can form a production line like you see here. However, is it truly reproduction? I'd say it's probably a bit of a stretch to go as far as saying that Cylons reproduce, particularly taking parts of themselves and continuing it on. I don't think they do. So this is another one the Cylons don't technically tick. All right, excretion. So excretion is not all about what you do on the toilet, but the living things need to get rid of stuff that they do not need in their bodies. And this is a number of things, from excess heat to the carbon dioxide you breathe out that is actually not very good for us, to urine and fecal matter, which is your number twos, and all those other things, sweating and all that sort of stuff gets rid of toxins that you don't want in your body. And the process of this is called excretion. So all living things take stuff in, and they must also get rid of things. And you could argue that Cylons might be doing the same thing with things like excess heat and light coming from their sensors. And here I've got just a common heat sink that we have in many of our technology that would get rid of excess and unwanted heat generated by, a Cylon's energy system. Who knows? But for living things, there are a number of organs responsible for excretion. So our lungs get rid of any unwanted gases like carbon dioxide. Our kidneys and bladder are very important in filtering our blood and keeping us hydrated, getting our fluids back into our body, but getting rid of anything that our bodies don't need. So that's the excretion system. So all living things must excrete. So we tick that one. Again, you could maybe argue that Cylons do, so we'll leave that one as a 50-50. Finally, the N. So I said we've got to get rid of stuff, so we have to take it in. And this is your digestive system. So, we all need nutrition and food, and particularly for another process. So there are two processes that you can link, nutrition and respiration, and you can even link excretion into there. So these three are easily linked. Okay. For respiration, we need energy. To create energy, we need food, or particularly glucose, sugars, which our bodies can break down our food that we take in into. So the digestive system, you're all probably eaten something today, so that is your digestive system in action, and it links to your excretion system by, once you've used up everything you need to, you'll get rid of the stuff that you don't. Okay, so really important to keep our bodies healthy, keep our bodies growing, keep our bodies alive. So nutrition, last of the ticks, and we do that as a human species, and all other living things must do that too. Cylons, well, maybe they need oil, maybe they need to recharge, so that would be them taking in energy. Again, sort of quite hard to give an example of that. So I've just done an example of myself, a human, to a Cylon, a robot. They ticked the first couple, and then it was quite hard to justify whether or not they do the other parts of Mrs. C GREN. So what I want you to do now is to have a go at carrying it out for a plant. Okay, so pause the video now. What about plants? Do they carry it out? Go through Mrs. C GREN and tell me whether or not they carry out the processes to class them as being alive. Okay, welcome back. Let's see if you're right. Number one, plants grow towards light. This is called phototropism, where they bend towards light, they can direct their leaves. So tick if you got that they move. Respiration. Now plants are very interesting. They respire just like us. They take in carbon dioxide, but they also need oxygen to create the energy that they need as well. So they carry out respiration as well as us. So very simple process to create energy. Senses. So here you can see some cool examples of when they're touched, they can trigger based on that external stimuli, either for protection, this plant up here, or the fly trap when they sense that the fly has landed on them. Cells, slightly different to our cells, much more rigid in a sort of brick wall type shape. Those are really important to give them the strength they need to withstand wind and other abiotic factors, to be strong. We're allowed to move with the way we've evolved, so we don't need as rigid cells, so ours are a bit more rounded and not as ordered in terms of this sort of brick-like structure. But they do have cells. Plants have cells. And we've all seen plants grow. Here's some cool things. Many of you have done some growing investigations this year, or you will do at your time here at school. So plants grow, and we see that all the time. You only have to look at your garden year to year. Reproduction. Plants do it very much the same as us in terms of they can do it sexually by two trees, one releasing pollen and the other tree catching it, and using that genetic information from both plants to create a new, improved plant, utilising the best of both those plants. You'll learn about reproduction in year 10 a lot more specifically, and plants often make seeds, and these seeds have cool adaptations which allow them to move and travel great distances, like your dandelion here. And finally, excretion. As I said, we excrete CO2 as one of our waste gases. Plants excrete oxygen as one of theirs. So but it is an example of excretion through their leaves here. You can see through their stomata. And finally, nutrition. You've done a video specifically on photosynthesis, so I won't dwell on it here, but it is how plants create their food and break down that starch that they make into energy. So really important process. Without this process, we probably wouldn't have life as we know it on this planet. So it is really important. So there you have it. Success criteria of today's little video. Can I deduce if an object is living or not? Which of these is living? Was I living? Yes, we could tick that I did all of Mrs. C GREN. However, our Cylon Centurion, our Cylon robot, could not really do all of them. So we can deduce and articulate and say that it cannot. So you might be given some other examples if you want to get the jump the gun on some. Is fire alive? Is a cloud alive? How can you justify an ant being alive? It's not just about saying it does all of those, it's about saying how it does all of these. So think of examples, use your words, use your keywords, and you'll be winning. So there you go. I can deduce if an object is living or not. As always, fellas, any questions, come and see me in class. I'll catch you there.